4 o'clock, Wagner, I don't know how to pronounce that school's name, which started off the season with a loss, traveling to Rutgers, which started off its season with an amazing victory on the road against Boston College, able to eke out a victory there and keep the Big Ten undefeated in out-of-conference games. Thank you, Rutgers. Big victory. Great victory for Rutgers. A lot of times, before Greg Schiano was the head coach of Rutgers, that was a game Rutgers would lose, and they wouldn't even come back and win that game. It wouldn't be close. But with Greg Schiano, they have the wherewithal to come back in a football game. They have the wherewithal to win that comeback and not sputter down the stretch. I really admire that about this Rutgers team. They've changed, and they've become a better football team. I really like watching Rutgers play, and I'd really like to see them actually get to a bowl game this year. I understand they got to a bowl game last year, but the fact is that was in really kind of an unearned bowl game appearance, if you get what I'm saying. They went 5-7. They really should not have been in that bowl game, especially against a team like Wake Forest. But at least they made it there, and I think that was a big step for the program. This is their first year they can actually go 6-6 and make it to a bowl game, and I think that'd be a huge step forward for a Rutgers program like this, like with Greg Schiano. I think this is an easy victory for the Rutgers program, although with Rutgers, I don't know how often I get to say that. I think they win, and I think they cover the spread against Wagner. At 5 o'clock, we've got our first 5 o'clock game and our only 5 o'clock start game. Alabama State, which started off its season 2-0, traveling to UCLA, which was able to win against Bowling Green State, although it was not as easy as a lot of UCLA fans would have liked. UCLA favored by 48.5 points in the Pac-12 network, and it really should cruise through these first 3 football games. They play Alabama State this week, and they play South Alabama next week, and this should be an easy cruising if you're UCLA. Dorian Thompson-Robinson went 32 of 43 last week, threw for 298 yards. That's 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. Zach Charbonnet on the ground had 21 carries for 111 yards and a touchdown. And Casimir Allen had 10 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown. UCLA is a team that really wants to show that they compete for a Pac-12 title this year, right? They're going to be in a tough side, right? They play with Utah and they play with USC, which is, those are the only 2 ranked Pac-12 teams this week are the side that you guys are competing on with. But UCLA is a team that hopes that they can compete for possibly a championship, a Pac-12 championship this year. They're really looking forward to that possibility. The Bruins are really thinking they can compete this year, and this is a chance to really prove it. You get a great 3 games to tune up your offense, tune up your defense before you start hitting a tough Pac-12 schedule. Really great 3-game openers. UCLA favored by 48.5 points, and I think that's right. I think they win by more than that. Alabama State, as good an FCS program they are, they're playing UCLA, and this is going to be a dominant win by the Bruins. At 5:30, we got Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word, bro. Started off its season 1-0, traveling to Nevada, which started off its season 2-0. Somehow Nevada's only favored by 4 points in the Mountain West Network. And Nevada was the team I was forgetting in the Mountain West, by the way. That's still undefeated. Nevada is a good team. I think it's a good team. And I think it has a good chance of being the last 3 Mountain West teams standing after this week undefeated. I don't understand why they're only favored by 4 points against Incarnate Word. I understand that Incarnate Word, bruh. It's a good FCS team, but Nevada's a good FBS program. I don't understand all the hate on it. Shane Illingworth has yet to throw a touchdown pass, but also yet to throw an interception. He's gone 18 of 25, threw for 152 yards and 72% completion percentage through his first 2 games. Toa Tawa has really been carrying the offense on the ground. 37 carries for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Jamal Bell through the air has had 9 catches for 71 yards. But Nevada's defense is legit. And they're a good football team this year. I do think the Wolfpack's good. I don't think they're going to be competing for a Mountain West title or anything. But I do think Shane Illingworth isn't exactly the worst downgrade from Carson Strong in the world. I do think he's a little bit of a downgrade, but he has been playing pretty well, enough to win football games down here at the stretch. I think the Wolfpack has been playing good football so far, and I don't understand why they're only favored by 4 points in the Mountain West Network. I'm going to take Nevada to win this one, at home even. I think they'll win it by more than 4. 6 o'clock, we got Kansas, which started off its season with a win, traveling to West Virginia. West Virginia has a chance to be another Power 5 team eliminated early on here. Started off its season with a loss against Pitt last week. West Virginia favored by 13.5 points on ESPN+. Jalen Daniels, Kansas's new quarterback. He went 15-18 last week, threw for 189 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and had an 83.3% completion percentage as they dominated their FCS opponents last week. Devin Neal, which is a big improvement over last year where they were able to eke by North Dakota. Or is it South Dakota? I don't remember. But they were able to eke past the Coyotes. Devin Neal on the ground had 4 carries for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaging over 25 yards per carry. Absolute insane stats. Obviously, that is not something that you can keep up as a season goes on, but it's just insane stats to look at the time. Lawrence Arnold through the air had 4 catches for 56 yards. JT Daniels, by the way, played well enough for West Virginia to win that football game. He went 23 of 40, threw for 214 yards, and was going on a game-winning drive when his receiver dropped it, went straight in the arms of a corner, and they returned it for a pick six. It really is not JT Daniels' fault they lost that football game. A lot on that receiver, and a lot on the defense, honestly. 2 touchdowns to 1 interception, had a 57.5% completion percentage, and that 1 interception was the one I just described to you, not JT Daniels' fault at all. C.J. Donaldson on the ground had 7 carries for 125 yards and a touchdown, and Bryce Ford Wheaton led his team through receiving, had 9 catches for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. West Virginia leads the series all time, 10-1. Last 8 games have gone to West Virginia. Last victory for Kansas was in 2013, so it has been 9 years since Kansas has won this matchup. It's going to be a tough one. Again, West Virginia has one of their best quarterback since Will Grier, and there's an argument to be made. I don't think he's better than Will Grier. Will Grier was pretty dang great at West Virginia. He might not have made it in the NFL, but he was good at West Virginia. The Mountaineers look like a good football team. I don't think the Pitt loss... I think the Pitt loss shows how good they could possibly be. I don't know exactly the level that they're going to be competing this year, but I really like West Virginia to win this football game. I understand Kansas is an improved football team. Maybe they keep it close, but I think West Virginia is just like the much better football team. I think Lance Leipold is a little bit outmanned and outgunned here, and I think West Virginia wins and covers that 13.5-point spread. 6 o'clock, we have Old Dominion, which these two teams, if I had to predict who was going to be playoff eligible, I probably would have picked Old Dominion, but East Carolina looked like the much better football team last week. Old Dominion somehow was able to eke out a victory at home against Virginia Tech. I don't know if that says more about Old Dominion or more about Virginia Tech. I personally think probably more about Virginia Tech, but Old Dominion did look good enough to win that football game against Virginia Tech, and they definitely outplayed them. Traveling to East Carolina, which they outplayed NC State, and they were not able to pick up the victory. They start off the season 0-1. Old Dominion has a chance to be knocked out of playoff contention early, but to be fair, I was another week. It lasted a week longer than I thought it would. I did not think I was going to be predicting this game the last week, but here I am because of Old Dominion. We had a chance that it could have been both games, but East Carolina's kicker ends up blowing it down the stretch. Got a feel for the kid. East Carolina, though, is still favored by 12.5 points on ESPN+. Hayden Wolf threw the air last week for Old Dominion. He went 14-35, threw for 165 yards, and had a 40% completion percentage. Still able to win that football game, though. Blake Watson on the ground had 19 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown, and Allie Jennings, the third, had 5 catches for 122 yards. Holton Allers through the air. He was really the hero last game. He put them in a great chance to win that football game, just didn't end up pulling it off down the stretch. He went 25-41, threw for 267 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and had a 61% completion percentage. He also led his team on the ground 5 carries for 57 yards, and C.J. Johnson through the air had 6 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. East Carolina leads the series all time, 6-3. The last 4 games have gone to ECU, which means at one time Old Dominion was winning at 3-2. Last Old Dominion victory was in 1939. It has been a hot second since Old Dominion has beaten East Carolina. And I think it's going to be a little bit while longer, right? Old Dominion was able to beat Virginia Tech. Props to him, but it was a close game, and Virginia Tech is not a good football team this year. East Carolina, on the other hand, should have beaten a NC State team that looks to be really good this year. They're a top 25 football program. And they almost beat them in the Boneyard. I think East Carolina finally gets their victim here in the Monarchs. And I do feel bad for Ricky Ronnie. I think he's a pretty good head coach for Old Dominion, honestly. I think he's been coaching really well so far for the Monarchs. But I just think I just think East Carolina looked like the better football team last week, and I think they win, and I think they kind of dominate the Old Dominion Monarchs and win by more than 12.5. 6 o'clock also, we got Gardner Webb, which started off the season with a win, traveling to Coastal Carolina, which was able to eke out a victory against Army, and that was one of the legit low-key better matchups of the week, honestly. Army looked good last week, going against a Coastal Carolina team that was also really good. Coastal Carolina favored by 35 points on ESPN+, and it was a close game. Grayson McCall, large reason why they won that game, was very effective through the air. Passing game, he went 12 of 17, threw for 174 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 70.6% completion percentage. Very effective through the passing game. Reese White on the ground, though, deserves some recognition. He had 21 carries for 133 yards and a touchdown. And Sam Pinckney, their star tight end, had 3 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown. This game is probably not going to be close at all. Coastal Carolina is a team that is competing for a chance at the playoffs every year. I understand last year they were eliminated rather early, I believe. But Coastal Carolina is still a very, very good football program. And I believe the last Group of 5 team that I was talking about that wasn't Cincinnati was UTSA last year, which is actually pretty impressive. But they were eliminated right off the bat. I wonder what the last Group of 5 program we'll be talking about this year is going to be. It's going to be kind of interesting. Normally there's they start off early and then they kind of all lose except for one who goes on a streak and wins all. Marshall, I believe, was that team 2 years ago. It's always a weird team that you don't really expect. Sometimes it's Cincinnati, UCF, a team that you'd expect, but another time it's like UTSA or Marshall or a team that you didn't really expect to be great at the start of the year. Coastal Carolina, obviously, it was a couple years ago. I was talking about them for a long time. But the Chanticleers, they have a great chance here. They really do have a good football team built up. With Grayson McCall, they have a great chance to win the Sun Belt this year, especially with the weakness. App State looks good, but UL Lafayette loses Billy Napier. How good they're going to be after that is a big question mark. They've always been the top threats in the Sun Belt. And I guess it's not a huge... You lose UL Lafayette's consistency, I guess. And it's a question mark how good they're going to be. But you know how good App State's going to be. And that's going to be the game. That's going to be the marquee matchup when Coastal Carolina takes on App State. Obviously, I think Coastal Carolina wins this game. And I think they win by more than 35. At 6 o'clock, we got UAB, which started off its season with a win, traveling to Liberty, which also started off its season with a win. UAB favored by 6 points on ESPN+. And Liberty could lower that number to 2 independent teams that are still playoff eligible. Liberty is a tough football. It looked good last week against Southern Miss, able to eke out a victory against a good Southern Mississippi team. But Frank Gore Jr., you're going to definitely have to work on your ground game. And UAB is one of the last 3 remaining playoff contenders in Conference USA. It's the conference that has the least amount of teams standing, that's for sure. It's going to be interesting here for UAB, the Blazers. But Dylan Hopkins last week went 13-18, threw for 191 yards, a touchdown, 0 interception, 72.2% completion percentage against Alabama State, I want to say. And no, I think they went against Alabama A&M. Jermaine Brown Jr. through the air had on the ground had 10 carries for 114 yards, a touchdown. And Tijuan Palmer had 4 catches for 57 yards. Kaiden Salter, our head leader, he's the new quarterback for Liberty after Malik Willis left. He went 8 of 13 last week, threw for 148 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 61.5% completion percentage. Wasn't a lot, but it was enough to pull off the victory against Southern Mississippi in a hard-fought victory. Kaiden Salter also led his team on the ground, had 9 carries for 65 yards, and Demario Douglas had 5 catches for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. Liberty leads the series 1-0 all time. In 2021, they won with Malik Willis at quarterback, 36-21 at UAB. But UAB has a chance on the road here against a Liberty squad that isn't as in tune as they were last year. Again, they had Malik Willis last year, which was a large reason why they ended up winning all those football games. UAB has always been a solid Group of 5 program, and I think it's going to be interesting if UAB loses. It's down to 2 Conference USA programs that are still playoff eligible. And if Liberty loses, there's down to 2 independents. It's not as impressive because the other independents outside of Army are just not all that good, with teams like UMass and UConn. You don't get that reference. It's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer reference. Oh my god, I can't speak today. And New Mexico State. Those are the teams that are really the other teams that have been eliminated, and it's just not that impressive. Liberty losing would lower that number to 2, and that'd be BYU and Notre Dame. I think it's going to be an interesting game here. I think it's going to be one of the low-key better matchups of the day. I think this is going to be a close ball game, but I think UAB wins this one. And I think they win it by barely more than 6. I think they're going to win by 10, maybe. At 7 o'clock, we got Kent State, which started off its season with a loss. Traveling to Oklahoma, number 7 Oklahoma, which started off its season with a win. Oklahoma favored 33 points on ESPN+. We're going to go over the stats real quick. Colin Schlee, the new quarterback at Kent State, faced Washington last week. And ended up going 12 of 24, threw for 178 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, and had exactly a 50% completion percentage. Also led his team on the ground at 8 carries for 47 yards. And Dante Cephas had 6 catches for 105 yards. Dylan Gabriel, on the other hand, through the air, kind of killed it for Oklahoma. He went 15 of 23 for 233 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 65.2% completion percentage, and the game against UTEP was never in doubt. Eric Gray on the ground had 16 carries for 102 yards, and Marvin Mims through the air had 3 catches for 81 yards. These two teams have never played, but you just look at last week's game, and you kind of can have an idea of how these ones are going to go. Kent State really struggled against a Washington team that is not even a top 25 team, and likely will not contend for the Pac-12 this year. On the other hand, you have number 7 Oklahoma, which could compete for a playoff spot this year, and obviously decimated UTEP in their first game. Dylan Gabriel is a phenomenal QB, and UCF was definitely missing him last night against Louisville. I think this game has a possibility of being really interesting if you're watching just for Oklahoma's sake, because you can have an idea of how good this team can be. These couple games are tune-up games for Oklahoma, because they're going to end facing Nebraska next game. I know you were thinking, oh no, Nebraska, it's not really that big of a deal, but Oklahoma really struggled against Nebraska last year, and Nebraska has arguably gotten better, right? And they've got a quarterback that almost, in Casey Thompson, that almost beat Oklahoma last year. And they had a good sizable lead if their defense didn't crumble down the stretch. So we'll see what happens with Nebraska next week. But Oklahoma, right off the bat, this is a big game that you need to win and you need to cover. And I think you need to look really good here early on, heading into that big matchup next week. I think they win, and I think they cover that 33-point spread. 7 o'clock, we got the biggest game of the day. Number 20 Kentucky, which started off the season with a win last week against Miami, Ohio. It's actually a closer game than I expected in the first half. Kentucky was able to pull away in the second half, but I think that's good news for Florida, who was able to eke out a victory, a hard-fought victory against Utah. And I hope you're excited if you're Kentucky, because you're entering the swamp, ladies and gentlemen. Bow! I hope Wildcats can take on Gators, because Gators are about to snap their jaws. Florida favored by 6 points on ESPN. This is a big matchup for both these football teams. If Kentucky really wants to compete in the SEC this year, this is a huge chance, a huge statement chance to get a victory. And if Will Levis wants to be considered a first-round quarterback, this is a huge chance against a good Florida defense. On the other hand, Florida, this is a much-needed victory for them if they really want to be seen as a top 10 football team and a team that can really take on Georgia this football season. If you really want to strike the heart in Georgia fans, if you could destroy Kentucky, that would be a huge victory. Even beat Kentucky, that would be big. Kentucky's Will Levis went 21 of 32 last week, threw for 303 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and hit 65.6% completion percentage. Kawasi Smoke on the ground. Remember, he's not going to have his partner in crime, Jarquez Hunter, this week. Just like he didn't have it last week. Smoke only had 7 carries for 32 yards last week, and Tavion Robinson through the air had 6 catches for 136 yards. Anthony Richardson is a guy a lot of teams are looking at as a possible first-round quarterback selection. He went 7. He really proved himself last week. He went against a Utah defense that is notoriously good. He went 17 of 24, threw for 168 yards and 70.8% completion percentage. Also led his team on the ground with 11 carries for 106 yards and count him 3 touchdowns. Not to mention his elite 2-point conversion with the amazing pump fake. Ricky Pearsall led his team receiving in 4 catches for 67 yards last week. Florida leads the series all time, 53-19. Last game did go to Kentucky, but Florida has won 33 of the last 35 times this team has played. Plus, Kentucky's going into a tough atmosphere in the swamp, but Will Levis, if any quarterback can beat Florida, it's Will Levis for Kentucky. Will Levis has looked phenomenally good for the Wildcats last year and this year. He's really good, guys. He's a good quarterback, and I think this could be a really tough matchup for Florida. I'd be hitting the over if I was a betting man, I like Florida in this matchup. Obviously, I'm a Florida Gators fan. The only reason I picked Utah last week was because I legitimately thought Utah looked like the better football team. But now, outside of Georgia, I think I'm going to pick Florida down the stretch because they just look like the better football team in all their other matchups. I think Florida's the better football team against Kentucky. I think it's a close game, but I think Florida ekes out a victory, and I think they cover that 6-point spread. At 7 o'clock, we got Central Arkansas, which started off its season with a loss. Traveling number 22, Ole Miss, which started off its season 1-0 against Troy. Ole Miss favored for 37.5 points on ESPN+. This is a good This is a good start in schedule. If you're Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, he went 18-27, threw for 154 yards, touchdown, interception, had 66.7% completion percentage. And this is good to be playing Troy and Central Arkansas before you start getting into the tough SEC games. Like eventually you're going to be playing in Alabama and Texas A&M. And I'm trying to think of the others. Mississippi State, obviously, is going to be a big rivalry game. Arkansas is going to be pretty significant. And there's a lot of tough games if you're Ole Miss on that side. Zach Evans threw the ground, though, had 20 carries for 130 yards. Michael Trigg had 4 catches for 33 yards, led his team receiving. Obviously spread the ball a lot out if you're Ole Miss. Central Arkansas, actually, I got to give a lot of props to Central Arkansas. It was one of my most viewed videos last year was Central Arkansas State. Maybe it's just the Arkansas State fans because Grambling, Arkansas State was also a huge draw this year. But Central Arkansas State was a big draw last year. Maybe we'll see if maybe if the Central Arkansas fans could really support the channel. That'd be great. But it's like Ole Miss all the way. Yeah, I think even Central Arkansas fans knew that. They lost last game, and it was not against a good enough opponent as Ole Miss. This is a tune-up game for Ole Miss, and I think the really interesting thing of watching it is Jackson Dart going to be as good as his previous. I think it's going to be tough to be as good as Matt Corral. Obviously, Matt Corral is a legend at Ole Miss. It's going to be a tough ask to replace that kind of talent. But Jackson Dart has looked good here early on in his career, and I think he wins this game for the Rebels, and I think they win by more than 37.5. At 7 o'clock, we got Syracuse, which started off the season 1-0, traveling to UConn, which started off the season 1-1. Syracuse favored by 23 points on CBS Sports Network. And I think what's going to be really, really interesting here is Syracuse looked really good against Louisville, and Louisville didn't look exactly bad against UCF. So what does that say about the Syracuse program moving forward? Garrett Schrader led his team in passing yards, obviously. He went 18-25, threw for 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Sean Tucker on the ground had 21 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown. Also led his team in receiving yards for 6 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown. Zion Turner, the new quarterback for UConn, it looked like it was going to be Taquan Roberson from the start of the season. But Zion Turner was able to beat him out as the season gone along, and he went 26-53 so far in 2 games. He's threw for 281 passing yards, 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and had 49.1% completion percentage. Nathan Carter, I hardly know her, had 43 carries for 313 yards and a touchdown, and Aaron Turner, I hardly know her, had 5 catches for 89 yards. Now, what you're thinking, how have these two teams matched up against each other in the past? UConn actually is winning the series, 6-3 all time. Last 3 games have gone to Syracuse, though, so UConn was at one point winning 6-0. The last UConn victory was actually in 2011, and Syracuse has a chance to even up that scoreboard even more here today, 6-4.